Baghdad prepares for a visit by the chief UN weapons inspector, Iraq declares a holy struggle against UN sanctions. Paula Jones goes home from Washington after leaving her mark on presidential history. And the small screen and big screen come together to honor their best and brightest. CNN Headline News, I'm Robin Johnson in Atlanta. Iraq isn't backing down on its demand for UN sanctions to be lifted. American diplomats say Iraq is just digging itself into a deeper hole. Peter Arnett reports the head of the United Nations Inspection Program hopes to salvage it and ease tensions when he arrives in Baghdad Monday.
The UN's chief weapons inspector will no doubt find Baghdad in no mood for compromise. Iraq's defense ministry is calling on all men, women, and former military officers to volunteer for weapons training. It's not the first time Baghdad has called for a volunteer army. Last November, the call went out for commando units when the confrontation between Iraq and the United Nations looked as if it might be headed for military action. Iraq's Vice President Taha Yassin Ramadan said the aim is to train 1 million people beginning February the 1st. Why now? Ramadan said that after 7 years of sanctions and cooperation with the UN Security Council and its committees, Iraq, quote, is left with no choice but to start a jihad or holy war. The plan to raise a popular army follows President Saddam Hussein's call to mobilize the citizenry in the face of what the Iraqi considers continuing military threats from the United States. In a weekend speech, President Saddam Hussein warned Washington against attacking his country. The possibility of a military strike against Iraq became more real last week when Baghdad once again prevented a UN inspection team from making its rounds. Baghdad said the team was disproportionately dominated by Americans and Britons. Iraq's unwillingness to allow UN inspectors into presidential palaces is another thorny issue facing Richard Butler in his talks with Iraqi officials.
The Security Council says we must be able to go anywhere, anytime, and that we do that for the reason of trying to do the disarmament job.
President Saddam Hussein is threatening to issue an ultimatum, giving the inspectors just 6 months to finish their work if, quote, Iraq doesn't sense cooperation from the United Nations.
To set a deadline and say you've got 6 months is really very arbitrary. It can't work. We're going to Baghdad tomorrow to talk.
Butler's visit here last month failed to resolve the issue of entrance to the presidential palaces. He's under mounting pressure to solve this and other issues diplomatically amidst growing support amongst Iraq's critics for a military solution to the crisis. Peter Arnett, CNN, Baghdad.
There's a new report that Iraq has tested biological weapons on prisoners. The Sunday Times of London reports the test began during Iraq's 8-year war with Iran. The paper quotes Israeli military sources who say 10 Iranian prisoners were lashed to posts and an anthrax bomb was detonated near them. UN weapons inspectors believe anthrax was an element of Iraq's biological warfare program. The Israeli cabinet has delayed a decision on withdrawing troops from the West Bank. The cabinet decided not to set a maximum amount of West Bank land it will turn over to Palestinian rule until after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu returns from Washington. The Clinton administration had hoped Netanyahu would present specific numbers when he meets with the president on Tuesday. Netanyahu says the delay won't deter the peace process.
Israel is committed to continue the peace process. Israel wants to continue the peace process and is prepared to withdraw from some territory in the West Bank. To do so, we expect the Palestinians to comply with the promises they gave us and the United States on such things as nullifying the PLO charter that still calls for Israel's destruction and in fighting terrorism systematically, neither of which has been done since the signing of these promises in the Hebron Accords. If the Palestinians carry out their commitments, we will carry out ours.
We are committed to the security. We have been forthcoming in implementing our responsibilities and our commitments. It is Mr. Netanyahu who has done everything possible to sabotage the peace process while he pays